Welcome to Whether or Not and to What Degree podcast. I'm First Alert Chief Meteorologist Kendra Kent, alongside First Alert Meteorologist Jake Grant. I almost called you Drake like Tori did one of those first days.
It's a running joke. It's we're about a month in now, and we have some good running jokes. That's one of them.
We're doing great. Yeah, I think it's just, what is it? Is it Meteorologist Jake? I think it may be like,
it's when you're trying to go from that T to the J, I think maybe that's a little bit of that.
Just know that we really do know your name.
Yes. Well, it depends. No, but it's been fun for sure, of course, and it is my stage name after all. So,
sure. Yeah.
Not my legal name of Jacob. So.
Yeah. So stage name. So different.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's great. All right. Well, we are here to talk about actual things, and we're going to be talking about the tropics today. So, we've gotten into hurricane season, and before we even had a chance to record our first podcast on hurricane season, we had our first named storm, and it actually brought impacts right here. Thankfully, not huge ones, but we did get some.
Yeah, and it just goes to show, even though all the talk was about the super El Nino and about how it's going to be such a quiet season, even though it could be a quiet season, we still get named storms, and this is pretty early for a named storm too, but it's in those spots that we typically see as the breeding ground of activity earlier on in the tropical season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. Is all it takes is one. You get a strong El Nino pattern. It usually weakens the trade winds, but we still have very warm ocean water, and that's one of the reasons that we saw that what was just a potential tropical cyclone jump to a tropical storm in a very short period of time. And as Jake mentioned, our likelihood of getting hurricanes per month, the relatively speaking, much higher likelihood toward that peak of hurricane season in September. But Jake, I know recently you did some digging and kind of looked back at when we've had El Nino years. Now, was this a super El Nino, or is that our last? I think it was just regular.
I believe
El Nino,
it was
right?
a strong El Nino year, or a abnormally strong, whatever the terminology is. It was El Nino.
Not considered super.
Yes, the super. It makes a huge difference. But we still had a lot of storms over the course of that last El Nino year, and 3 made landfall in the United States. And the one thing to keep in mind here, like you said, the water temperature is still very warm, and that was just with Arthur, that was just a disturbance off the coast of Mexico, and it was just warm enough to provide that development even in a year where maybe it's not primed in terms of the winds and other things. It keeps that activity there because the waters are so warm, and when these tropical systems go into undisturbed waters, there's been nothing in the Gulf all year long to this point. It's the first one of the year. It's easier for those storms to get that convection, rising motion, and even in El Nino years, we can get storms that develop and bring impacts, whether they're a tropical storm or a big storm. It doesn't necessarily matter if it has a name.
Yeah, and often they're what you call the homegrown ones, the ones that, sorry about that, the ones that happen closer to the United States. Sorry about that. I guess I hit decline. My poor mom. I'll call her back though. I didn't tell her we were doing a podcast. She wouldn't want to be on it.
Yes.
So what were we talking about? Oh yes. So homegrown systems are easier to get, and I noticed with Arthur, there was shear around it in the Gulf, but it had that little pocket where the upper level winds were relatively calm. It really was like everything just kind of came together for that brief tropical system to develop. Because overall, especially once we get into July and August, when we start to see more development out in the middle of the Atlantic, that's when the El Nino pattern really kicks in and begins to cause less storms. So usually El Nino means more rainfall for us here in South Carolina, because our weather pattern is a busier one. We tend to get more systems, a more active subtropical jet, but with that more active upper level pattern, we get less hurricane activity. So it's interesting how these patterns balance each other out, because on La Nina years, our best bet to get rain is going to be a big soaking from a tropical system maybe. In an El Nino year, we're more likely to get rain from just a typical mid-latitude cyclone or just typical late-day storms.
Yeah, and that's something that, we're seeing over the next, just looking at some of the climate stuff over the next few months, it looks to be above average with the precipitation a little bit over the course of the next few months. And again, long-term forecasting, maybe not the end-all be-all, but it's those signals that we look for. And with even the one that we just had, it showed, even though it was a super weak storm, it brought in a lot of moisture regardless. And that's the thing with these tropical systems is even if they're not forming out in the Atlantic. In the Gulf, it's a little bit easier because, like you mentioned, there's not as much of that upper level shear. Sometimes they can just develop right off the coast of near Galveston and Houston. They're heavy rainers. They bring a lot of precipitation. And even though the winds were super weak, it brought a ton of rain in a short amount of time. And we were still watching for maybe that severe threat here.
Yeah.
But it's a thing where, it's going to be a very active stretch in terms of precip for us, but maybe not in terms of tropical storms, even though we did have that earlier than we expected.
Exactly. And, you had touched on this earlier, but just, a graphic explaining it. And if you're listening, we'll walk you through it. But essentially, during the months of June and July, the most likely area for formation of a tropical system is going to be closer to the coast, like those homegrown ones we talked about. The Gulf is also an area we'd be watching too. And these are areas where mainly it's because the water heats up faster in these spots. We get that warm ocean water going so much quicker. And then, of course, Jake, as we expand into August and September, there's our peak. That's when it gets out more so, the Cape Verde Islands, the development near Africa. And that's when the super El Nino pattern really begins to kick in to limit at least the amount of those systems.
Yes, because the main steering current with those systems is those upper level trade winds, and it's such a key on timing. There's always the question of how quick does it turn? Does it go through the Caribbean and turn out to sea, head towards Bermuda? Does it come closer to the coast? So that's when you start to see this more upper level patterns. Say that 5 times fast. Yeah, sound it out. But in the Gulf, there's maybe less of that influence. But in those super El Nino years, you see the effects of what's happening out in the Pacific, where it's a more active season for them. And for us, those trade winds help to maybe steer it out to sea a little bit more, or not as much of a possibility of development, as they the way I think of it is they just kind of chop off the top of those storms and kind of stop that upper level initiation for the thunderstorms and the growth of the tropical systems.
Yeah, essentially just kind of disrupts its breathing mechanism.
Yes.
It can't.
It's like an organism.
Exactly. And it's strange to call it, but it really is, because the outflow kind of helps it to eliminate. And then, of course, it's converging on the surface near the water. But you can see, again, if you're not watching, the main area of development during the peak of hurricane season really is in the middle of the Atlantic. And then there are a lot of those storms that curve up. And my favorite thing is when you see a big storm starting to develop, but then you can see out in advance that it's got a lot of wind shear to battle, and it just can't hold it together, or it isn't even able to form completely. So that's what we're looking at. And of course, it's a quick drop as temperatures begin to cool in October. We really start to see less initiation of storms, but it can still happen even into November. We can get storms, and I recall we had one last, and I forget the name now, but there was one in the Caribbean that happened, I believe, in early November of this last year. But it's the Caribbean and right up along the East Coast. It still holds on to some of that warmer water. And still has that potential for development. So we can come back on camera. I clicked ahead too many graphics. But anyway, so that's essentially what we're looking at. It can be a confusing thing because we say, this is not going to be a very active, not as active of a season, but then we get Arthur that pops up. So hopefully that clears it up a little bit, that really during that peak, August, September, that's when we really should feel those effects much more.
Yeah, when the development is out in the Atlantic, again, there's more of the variables that come into play in the upper levels of the atmosphere. The Gulf, I don't want to say it's cut off from those El Nino effects, because it's not, but it's also able to get a little bit warmer there. It's more shallow water compared to what's out in the deeper parts of the Atlantic, and we saw that because the water temperatures were already up, I think, in the upper 80s by the time that formed. So
wild.
That allows that evaporation, and it allows the growth in terms of the precipitation. So typically that's why we see those heavy rainers really coming out of the Gulf. With Harvey, and Arthur was not Harvey, but you see some of those storms that, like you mentioned, they just kind of go up the coast, and then they can bring stuff when they get picked up by the jet for us here across the upstate as well. It's good news in terms of tropical systems, but like you mentioned, maybe more active going forward into the fall and then winter. No.
Yeah, exactly. El Nino can bring some wild weather into our winters, and it's expected from the last I'd seen, this is supposed to be a pretty long-lived
Yes.
super El Nino that's likely going to at least
why it's
affect
super.
part of our winter. I know, long lasting and super strong, and nothing to be scared of or worry about. That's why we're here. We'll be bringing you the first alert, letting you know what we're seeing as we move forward. Because just like Jake said, long range forecasting, it gives us these little signals, but it's not perfect. So we will be on top of it for you, bringing you that first alert. But let us know. We're going to be going through the summer. This is kind of the dog days, the quiet days. We'll be probably doing one on summer storms coming up soon. But if you've got an idea for a podcast you'd like to hear from us, we're going to hopefully get National Weather Service on here pretty soon. And you'll be seeing it a little bit more frequently as well. Now that we've got Jake here, we have more staff, and we can bring you more episodes. So we'd love to hear if you've got any good ideas.
Yeah, no, we're always open to ideas as well. They can reach out however.
I guess email.
Email, social,
Yeah,
whatever. If we see
comment on
stuff.
Facebook. Just however you want to best find us. All right, well, this has been the latest episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you on the air.